10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm Sonali. I lead the go-to-market team at xto10x. A very, very warm welcome to all of you to the first edition of the Startup Summit powered by xto10x.
Hi, I'm Teja. I'm part of the tech team here at xto10x. Thank you all for braving the Bangalore traffic to be with us today. Me and Sonali will be your hosts for the evening. Please give yourself a big round of applause for this act of bravery. We have a lot of exciting events planned for the evening, and without further delay, I'd like to call upon Sai Kiran Krishnamurthy, aka Psyche, to kick us off.
So here's a little bit about Psyche. Psyche is the co-founder and CEO of xto10x. Before founding xto10x, he led the marketplace at Ola and also led Flipkart's supply chain vertical, eCart. Teja, do you know that the idea of starting xto10x actually came over a breakfast meeting between Binny, Psyche and Neeraj, like literally over aloo parathas?
यार सोनाली, आपने कभी सोचा है हम तो रोज खाते हैं परोठे, हमें ऐसा आइडिया क्यों नहीं आते?
So what you eat doesn't matter, Teja, but who you eat with makes all the difference.
I guess so.
And what happened over that meeting was that Psyche, Binny, Neeraj, all of them were discussing the challenges that they faced while scaling up Flipkart. And they felt that many other founders would be going through the same journey. So why not create a company that makes scaling easier? And xto10x was born. And since then, there has been no looking back, both for Psyche and for xto10x. Psyche has personally spoken to over 200 founders and helped them in their scaling up journey via xto10x. Over to you, Psyche, to help us kick off the summit. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for him.
The only thing that strikes me about this page that was back there was how young I look in that photograph. That was just a year ago, believe it or not. Seemed to have aged a lot while having those 200 conversations on scaling. Incidentally, they said Neeraj, Binny and I had breakfast and that's where the idea was born. Let's be very clear, this is all Binny's fault. Binny ki boss bahut mistake kiya Flipkart banane mein. Other founders should not have to go through this. We need to build something like that. Psyche, you have to do it. So that's how so they gave the impression of a gentle conversation. That's kind of how it went. So anyway, setting the record straight. Let's quickly start with telling you a bit about xto10x. Many of you in the room know us as a company that helps you with OKR implementation, or helps you with branding, or helps you with culture, or helps you with business design and becoming profitable. Any guesses which of those we really are? Okay, the answer is all of the above and a little bit more. The best part of it is we worked with about 250 growth stage startups in the last 2 years after COVID hit through link journeys. And we thought this idea of having real conversations on scaling is something we should do with the ecosystem year after year. So today in the room, we have about 200 plus companies. You can see the logos there on the screen, all of whom who have come to be a part of the scaling journey. Thanks for being here with us. The idea is to have real conversations on scaling. And as you know, we're going to have some power pack conversations about that. And nothing is more real than the scaling experience of the 4-star guests we have today, who are going to join us first for the keynote speech and then for a panel discussion on the reality of building an enduring business. You see them on the screen. It's Nandan, Harsha, and of course, Binny. So we're going to have a panel discussion about that. Let me tell you a little bit more about the agenda. This is roughly what the evening looks like. We'll go in a few seconds to Nandan for the keynote speech. Then we'll spend an hour in a panel discussion on what does it take to really scale through tough times. As an ecosystem, we're entering a very different phase now from a funding standpoint, and all of us as founders, we know, want to build real businesses in the next 12, 18 months. How do we go about that? We'll benefit from the experience of our 4 panelists. We're going to do an award ceremony on a topic very, very close to our hearts, which is on culture and employee NPS. We actually have more than 50,000 team members participating from across the startup ecosystem, and some very, very high quality winners will be celebrated tonight. And then, of course, drinks and dinner where we can continue the conversations. Hope all of you plan to be there for that. So let me not waste any further time in welcoming our keynote speaker. It is an honor and a privilege, honestly, to welcome someone and introduce someone who needs no introduction. Anyone here in the room feels that I need to go over Nandan's accomplishments? Let me do it anyway, because it is so enjoyable to go through every one of these points. By the way, I'd love to have one of these in my life. If I could have even one bullet point, Nandan, I'd take it any day, but there are three. Co-founder and non-executive chairman of Infosys, founding chairman of Aadhaar. Incidentally, when I was explaining to my kids who the keynote speaker is today, it's so easy, because everyone knows what an Aadhaar card is. Luckily, they had no complaints. They were very happy with Aadhaar. And then finally, building UPI, which is even today, the gift that keeps on giving, transforming how payments happen across 1 billion people in India. This list goes much longer, incidentally. It reads more like an essay, but that would mean I'm talking here instead of handing over the mic to Nandan and welcoming his thoughts on what does it really take to build a great enduring business. Nandan, if you'd join me, please.
Thanks, Saiki. It's really absolutely wonderful to be here for this event by X to10x. When Binny told me about this idea, I was really very, very happy and impressed, because I think the need of the hour is how do we, in a systematic fashion, help our 90,000 startups really scale up and become large companies. Because, you know, my experience in the startup world is actually quite recent. What happened was I spent the first 30 years of my life co-founding and running Infosys, and that time I had no time to look at anything else. And then I went to the government for 5 years, and I had no time for anything else. So I came back to Bangalore in 2014 and was wondering what to do. And then I started going for walks in Koramangala, and every second house had a startup. So I said, there's something, you know, like while I was sleeping, I'm like Rip Van Winkle, who's been sleeping for 30 years. I get up and see all this activity, I see all this energy, and I started meeting these young companies and really got a sense of what's happening, and I really felt that there was something happening. But in 2014-15, I was not really convinced that this, I said, this is nice stuff, but is it going to move the needle on India's development? And that was what my trip in life was. And I was not completely clear it was, but over the last 2 to 3 years, when I see the scale of what's happening, the fact we have 90,000 startups, the fact that we have so many great success stories, the fact that we have had so many exits, no matter we have whatever, we see winter and all that right now. But fundamentally, I'm convinced that all of you together and all your other compatriots around the country will make a material change to this country. And that's why I believe it's very, very important to encourage and do something. And the fact that X to10x has created a very clear platform, a very clear approach to helping companies to scale up and creating cohorts who can help each other to scale up, I think is a very, very important thing, which is why I thought I should come in and speak to you. So I'll speak about two parts of my life, which is my private sector part and my public sector part, because I'm one of those crazy guys who's done both those things. So my private sector life began as a co-founder of Infosys. Now I can assure you that co-founding a company in 1981 is not easy, because in 1981, there were no angel investors, there was no VCs, there was no private equity, there was no SoftBank, there was no Tiger, you know, there was nobody around. And therefore, we had to build the company by bootstrapping. In other words, we had to earn the money and put the money back and then earn some more money. And so it was quite a long journey for us to do that. But it also taught us a few things. It taught us about the fact that you have to create a company for the long term. It taught us to be frugal with our capital. Sometimes I wonder what you guys do with all the capital you raise, but I think frugality is very important in my book. We learned that, you know, creating a company is running a long distance. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think we talked about the fact that culture is very important, and I noticed that a lot of the work that X to 10x does is on culture. I think culture is super important. And as Peter Drucker said, culture trumps strategy. And I would further say that strategy trumps tactics. So I think it's very important to build the right culture when you're building a company for the long term. It's also important to realize that building companies for long term is about delayed gratification, because it's not about getting all the rewards right now. Rewards will come later, but it's about building for the long term. So Infosys in the first 10 years was really a very small company because we were growing up in a company before economic reforms. Now, most of you are probably born after that. But in 1991, when India's economic reform happened, suddenly the whole game changed. And it was possible to think about growing big and becoming different. And it was very much different from the early days. And that is when we discovered a very important lesson, which very well applies to all of you, which is how do you think of the future of the company? And till then, the way we thought about the future of the company was to say, our revenue today is X, next year will be X plus 20X, or X plus 25X. In other words, we thought of growth in increments to where we were at that point. And then we discovered a new, which is the thinking forward from where you are kind of model. But what we did, which changed our mind around 91, 92, is instead of saying, what do we grow next? We said, why don't we set an ambitious goal for 3 years from now or 5 years from now? And let's set that goal and then work backwards. And I think the big discovery for us was that rather than going forward from where you are, if you can plant your stake in the ground and say, this is where I want to be in 5 years, and then you work backward from that, and then you figure out what does that mean in terms of strategy, in terms of tactics, in terms of people, in terms of capital, in terms of products, in terms of services. It's a much better way to do things. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings that we had. And every time we set a goal, and all our goals are in revenue, okay, not market cap goals, revenue goals. So we set a goal of being $100 million in revenue. When we reached $100 million in revenue, we set a goal of being $1 billion in revenue. When we hit $1 billion in revenue, we set a goal of being $10 billion in revenue. And that's why we kept upping the game in terms of what we wanted to get. And so 40 years later, Infosys is today a company with revenues of $16 billion, profits of $2.9 billion, free cash flow of $3 billion, and a market cap of over $80 billion. And that's really what building a company in the long term is. And this is going through all the ups and downs of the last 40 years, dealing with the economic reforms. While it created opportunity, it also created threats because new players could come to the market, dealing with the financial crisis in Asia, dealing with the dot-com boom and bust, dealing with the global financial crisis of '08, and then, of course, the last 5 years, dealing with COVID and the current economic downturn. So I think resilience is really how well all of you can build companies that can actually navigate all these things and still come out ahead. And that's something which is very important. And I think one of the things which was obvious in the data which Psyche and Binny and Ramya presented to me was how much important people are. And those companies that do a great job in attracting, motivating, and retaining people in the long term are going to do much better than those who don't. And therefore, I think there are systematic ways in which organizations can become the best company to attract people, the best company to retain people, the best company to motivate people, and so on. And I do believe that's one of the things that you're all learning from X to 10X. The other thing is about how do we think of strategy. And one thing I've realized about strategy now is that it's not about do we do A or B. It's about saying, can we do A and B depending on what happens in the market? In other words, strategy is about flexibility. Strategy is about optionality. It's about having the ability to go either way depending on how the world changes. Because how the world changes is something unpredictable to us. We can't anticipate that. But if we create enough agility, enough flexibility, enough ability to pivot on a dime, then whatever happens in the market, you're able to make that change. And I think that's very important. I'll give an example. When the pandemic hit, we had 300,000 employees in 40 countries who had to work from home within 2 weeks. And the reason we were able to do that was that we had built a network which was already designed to work from home. So that it had all the capability of working from home, it had all the network security, etc. So, except it was designed assuming that only 10% of the employees will work from home. Suddenly we had a situation where 100% of the employees had to work from home. But because the network was fundamentally designed to work from home, it took us just 2 weeks to pivot the whole thing to work from home for everybody. But that is because the original design allowed that flexibility. And therefore, being able to, therefore, I think a large part of strategy to me is being able to pivot around very easily, making it very agile, even though, and not about necessarily saying do A or B. It's being able to either A or B based upon the circumstances. And there are many, many lessons that we have learned in this journey. It's about, Infosys business is a B2B business. Therefore, it's really about building long-term relationships. We have clients who have cumulatively given us more than $1 billion of revenue, many clients of that type. And therefore, having those long-term relationships and being able to continue to provide very high-quality services to them so that you can continue to get business is very, very important. And again, when I was talking to Binny and Psyche, I was looking at the cost of customer acquisition. I'm a strong believer in not spending much money on customer acquisition because the best customer acquisition is zero cost. And there are many, many ways to think about it. How do we innovate and so on. So that's largely a little bit about my private sector life. But I also had this other hat, which is the public sector world, which I stepped into inadvertently because in 2008, I wrote a book called Reimagining India. And one of the chapters in the book was about identity and how identity could transform, public governance. And then I got a call from Prime Minister and others in Delhi and said, why don't you implement what you said? In other words, walk your talk. It's all very well to write a chapter saying ID will change life. Well, can you actually do it? And that's what led me to go to the government of India and lead the Aadhaar project. Now, this was a very big shift in my life. I had a corner office in a beautiful campus with a golf course. I gave that up. I had, 100,000 people working for me at the time. I gave that up and did a startup in the government. So startups in the government, there are no stock options in the government. There's no RSUs in the government. There's no liquidity event in the government. You do it only because it's a good thing to do and people are going to benefit. So all the rewards of a startup in the government is psychic. It's not financial. It's not material. And so I went there. I was employee number 1 of this government startup. No budgets, no staff, nothing. And I slowly built the team. And the biggest challenge I had was actually the people challenge. Now, as you know, getting the team to work together is very important. But this startup had different kinds of people. On the one hand, I had people who were from the government, extraordinarily competent bureaucrats who knew how to do the government. But I couldn't build a state-of-the-art technology platform with just bureaucrats. I also needed technologists. So on the other side, I was able to attract technologists, people who are really very, very good at technology. And I brought these two teams together. And that was actually the hardest part for me. Because the culture of government and the culture of startups is very different. The culture of government has more of bureaucracy, has more of, hierarchy, and the startup guys were roaming around the rooms, meeting in the office in shorts. So it was a little difficult to reconcile the two worlds. But we managed to get everyone to work together simply because we said, if we set ourselves ambitious, audacious goals, then the goal becomes more important than the ego. And everybody is willing to subsume their ego to the larger goal. And that's equally true of all of you. I think if you have a great vision, a great desire to build an institution really for the long term, and if everybody in your organization has bought into that vision, then miraculously the interpersonal issues will dissolve because the larger goal is bigger than the small little problems you have with each other. And then I had to do something. I had to create, again, going back to my thesis that you have to set a goal and then figure out how to get there without knowing how to get there when you set the goal. I went into a cabinet meeting and said, we'll issue 600 million Aadhaars in 5 years. So all my guys said, are you crazy? We have not issued one Aadhaar and you want to issue 600 million. I said, don't worry, we're going to commit to this. So we made a public commitment. Everybody said, nobody in government makes public commitments. He says, bad idea. You can't get it done, so don't be stupid. I said, no, we'll do it. So we set a goal of 600 million. And having set the goal, we sat down and said, how do we get there? And that's how we built our infrastructure to get to 600 million. But remember that these kind of things are not just about technology. Obviously, the technology was extremely capable. It was built in 15 years back using an open source stack. It was built at population scale. We had to build a system that could enroll 1.5 million people a day, which means we had to have 35 enrollment stations around the country, all doing enrollment in identical quality, and then feeding the data for other these things. We had a system which had to do 500 trillion biometric matches every night just to eliminate duplicates, and so on. So a lot of very, very population scale technology. But the equally difficult part was really managing the whole, the politics and getting everybody on board, getting the political system on board, getting bureaucrats on board. I would go to every state in the country, meet the chief minister, meet the bureaucrats, and convince them why this is a good thing to support. And we were able to get a massive, sort of coalition of enthusiasts who put their weight behind it. And it took us 14 months to roll out the first Aadhaar. By the time I stepped down, it was 2014, we reached 600 million people. And then there was talk about would the new government support it, because in the election they had said, they think they had some issues, it's political. So I went and met Prime Minister Modi, and he was super convinced about the value of Aadhaar, and he took it forward. Today there's 1.3 billion people, and it does 50 million authentications a day, which means 50 million times every day somebody is using Aadhaar, doing an OTP auth or a fingerprint auth, iris auth, and the latest is face auth. So face auth is getting rolled out, which means on any phone with a camera you can do a face auth. So all these things happened. And then sometime in 2013, we began a conversation. I was with NPCI about, we really need to do something about digital payments. And the thesis was like this, that India will never be an advertising-led economy, because the revenue per citizen of advertising dollars is a fraction of what it is in the US. So the US, because you could do, somebody just keep a check on time, Psyche. I don't have a clock here, so I don't know what's happening. You'll tell me, right? Okay, 5-minute warning. All right. So we said that the West could have an advertising economy because there was hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue spent on television advertising and print advertising. And that could migrate to the digital world, which is what Google and Facebook and all did. But India doesn't really have that kind of revenue of advertising. So India had to be a transaction economy. But how can you have a transaction economy without a micropayment infrastructure? It won't work. I mean, how long are you going to do cash on delivery and all? Which is what when you began, you started with cash on delivery. Or how long can you do it on credit cards and pay the fees and so on? So I became an advisor to NPCI, and NPCI and Pramod, who was the chief architect of Aadhaar, also built the architecture of helped design the UPI infrastructure along with Dilip Asbe, who is the CEO of NPCI. And again, we set high goals. So we said, how do we build a payment platform that can do 1 billion transactions a month? Of course, the fact it does 6 billion now. At that time, billion a month looked like a lot of transactions. And then that was again designed, using a completely open source stack and designed for scale. And that was, again, it took 3 years to build that. And it got rolled out in May of 2016. A lot of difficulties. Again, that problem was not tech alone. It was about convincing the banks. And some of the incumbent banks thought this was not a great idea. So, they were not too happy about some newfangled payment system where somebody on some phone pay will, pay to somebody else on some other pay and all that. So they couldn't deal with this stuff we were doing. So there's a lot of fear about what this meant. But anyway, we managed to push it through, and we rolled it out in May of 2016. And by October of 2016, it had reached only 100,000 transactions because nobody had heard about it. And then in November 2016, you had demonetization. And then suddenly the whole focus was how do we, in in a situation where we have a lack of paper money, how can digital payments be done? And that's when the government really took it upon itself to make digital payments a big goal. And so then app was built. App was built right here in Bangalore, in Koramangala. The app which became Bheem. It was built by JustPay for NPCI, and the PM rolled it out end of December 2016. And then it just took off. And then all the other guys came. Google came with Google Pay, PhonePe came, and Paytm came, and everybody came. So I think that's how that whole thing took off. But all these things they look easy, but behind the scenes, they're extraordinarily complex to push. So the clear message in all this is that whether you're building for a company or building for a country, it is whether you have the resilience, whether you have the fortitude, whether you have the ability to deal with adversity, the ability to overcome disadvantages, the bad times, and go forward. And today is one of those times when people are really worrying about what's going to happen in all this nuclear, VC winter, capital, and so on. I feel this is not, we have to learn to deal with these situations, and we only come out stronger. And that's the lesson I've learned from all the things. I mean, there were so many times in the history of Infosys when we had very difficult situations when we were wondering whether we would be able to continue. There were several times in Aadhaar when I thought it was over, game over, and then I had to fight back and make it happen. So I think we all face those things, and I'm sure you guys will face that. But it's important to have the long-term vision that you have. Now, based on I think as Saiki mentioned, just not Aadhaar and UPI, we are now rolling out a large number of these population scale initiatives. One is account aggregator. I don't know how many of you have been studying account aggregator, but that's fundamentally a radical way of putting data in the hands of consumers and small businesses. And today we have 1.1 billion bank accounts linked to the account aggregator system. And many, many account aggregators are coming online. Many people, startups, etc., are building applications for lending, applications for wealth management. They'll all use this framework. And this will fundamentally transform and democratize access to financial services, which is something that I'm sure many of you are looking at. The other big thing which we are doing is the ONDC, or the Open Network for Digital Commerce. I had a review just yesterday, and the idea being that we will create a model where e-commerce, instead of being done in a monolithic fashion, can be done by different actors through a protocol, which is interoperable. So somebody could be a supplier, he publishes his catalog on the system, so any buyer on the system can buy from that supplier. Any app can place the order, any delivery company, e-cart, can deliver it. So, fundamentally, it's a radical way of looking at e-commerce, and we also believe that this will lead to democratization of e-commerce and allow everyone to participate in e-commerce. Every retailer, every small supplier, every consumer company, everybody can participate. And this will really be quite a dramatic change if we can all make it work. And there's a lot of work happening on that. And then we have the stuff we are doing on AI. I just launched a center last week at IIT Madras to build a complete AI deck for all Indian languages. So using the latest models of BERT and all that, we're building natural machine translation capabilities in all 22 Indian languages, voice to voice, voice to text to text, the whole thing. And this, again, stack will be fully available for all startups. It's going to be an open source stack. So if you're building an app and you're delivering, Swiggy is delivering in, he can give message in 22 different Indian languages to the consumer. And we think that will democratize technology even further, because that will allow people to get access to all services in their own languages. So there's a whole host of things that are going on like this. One of the things that we built was FASTag. I led a committee that designed FASTag in 2010, and that's the basis for trucks being able to move seamlessly at toll gates, and that's again had a big impact on productivity and so on. And then I also led the committee which designed the architecture for GST and built the GST system. And today, GST and income tax revenues in India are the highest in Indian history, 11.7% of GDP. And the reason is very simple. We are using very advanced technology for tax collection. Everybody files a return, they do it directly, or they do it through some kind of a startup, ClearTax or Khata Book or whatever. And I believe that India's tax revenues will go up because of this, because now it's going to become increasingly difficult to get out of the tax system because everything is getting matched. And the formalization of the economy is also going up. Everybody's going to become part of the formal economy. So the combination of formal economy and the digital, we use a lot of AI in both these systems to figure out tax fraud. So I think you're going to see an increase in tax revenues for the country, which in turn means more money for the government to spend on development. So I think we are seeing a very interesting point where there are three things coming together. India's global technology capability, which generated $227 billion of revenue last year, employing 5 million people. Infosys represents that world. The fantastic startup world that you represent with 70,000 startups all trying to change and become scaling up. And the third is the digital infrastructure, which is unique in India. So all these three things are coming together. And essentially, I think we're going to see a golden period in the next 10 years when all these things coming together and the combinatorial innovation coming from that is going to create dramatic change. But the one lesson I've learned, I've been doing this for a long time, is focus, stay the course, marathon running, resilience, and don't get depressed. Get on with it. Get up every morning, brush off the problem of the previous day, and move on. And I can assure you that there will be gold at the end of the rainbow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nandan. Thanks a lot, Nandan. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause again for our keynote. I'm sure each one of us had some meaningful takeaways for our respective companies and growth stories. We'll just take 30 seconds to set up the stage for the next session, and then we'll begin.
Thanks, Nandan, for the wonderful speech. The next item on our agenda is a panel discussion on the topic, scaling through tough times. The four panelists today have a combined experience of 85 plus years in building companies. They have built their brands and scaled them into household Indian names. Please join me in welcoming the panelists today.
And on that note, let's give a big round of applause to our first panelist, the legend, Harsh Mariwala. So Harsh is the chairman of Marico Limited. Teja, have you ever heard of or used any of these brands? Parachute hair oil, Medicare shampoo, Live-On conditioner, and Saffola oil.
Sonali, as you can see, personally, my use case for Parachute has reduced over the years. But let me assure you, rest of my family is a big consumer of these brands, and I'm aware of these brands.
I'm still lucky to be using all those brands right now. And I'm sure many of us in the room and our families back at home are using these brands on a day-to-day basis. Harsh is the man who has built them and made them household names. In fact, apart from starting Marico, he has been a prolific investor and has started many other ventures, like the Ascent Foundation, the Mariwala Health Initiative, Kaya Skin Clinics, and much more. Teja, he recently also launched a book called The Harsh Realities, which is a playback on his entrepreneurial journey of building Marico. Thank you so much, Harsh, for being here today with us.
It's my honor to introduce the second panelist, Harsha, co-founder and CEO of Swiggy. I must confess, Sonali, there's not been a week where I have not had a few meals from Swiggy. And Instamart is my favorite chacha now, right? Ask him for anything and it's done in a jiffy. Harsha, I would like to thank you for your gesture, for taking a break from your family vacation to be with us today. Please join us on stage.
Thank you, Harsha. And it gives me immense pleasure and joy to introduce our next panelist, none other than Binny Bansal. Binny is the man who gave wings to the dreams of so many budding entrepreneurs and founders. In fact, many of the beneficiaries are sitting here today. And for those of you who do not know him so well, he was the co-founder of Flipkart, which needs no introduction. Binny, after having worked with you for so many years at xto10x now, it has been a pleasure to learn from you on a day-to-day basis. We welcome you here on stage. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I would like to invite Nandan, who's the fourth panelist. Psyche will be moderating the discussions today. Psyche, if we can have you on stage, please.
All right, lovely. Let me pick up on one thing you said, Nandan, and hear some thoughts from the three of you, Harsh, Harsha, and Binny, on how that applied in your own journeys. Given each of you has done the impossible in your own unique way. So this particular approach of setting an impossible, if not even a ridiculous goal, I know is a little bit of a habit with everyone on this panel. So I'm curious to understand what goes behind it. And it's not like it was ever easy, but each of you have done that in your own unique way. So would love to hear, Harsh, your own journey building Parachute when there was, forget about startup ecosystem, I think it was, as a category, it had, even the thought of branding was probably ridiculous. And you were coming from a family business where people probably thought, what's this guy up to? How did this feature in your own journey, Harsh, in terms of setting big goals and trying to stay the course despite the adversity?
So, my journey and my vision has evolved over a period of time. And I am strongly believing that on day one, when you join the organization or when you start a business, you don't have a clear vision. The environment changes, throws up new opportunities. So I, for one, believe that you have to look at a span of 3-5 years. And these days, the shorter is better because the future is so unpredictable. So look at a shorter span and then go on evaluating in that span also what new is emerging. What are the new things you need to do? Nobody could have predicted COVID. Nobody could have predicted this war. Nobody could have predicted the digital revolution to the extent at which it's occurring, maybe 10 years back. So, but when it happens, you have to be a part and parcel of that. So any discontinuity in the environment is, you have two lenses, threat or opportunity for your organization. Can you make it an opportunity? You have to participate in that. Now, my business is supposed to be the most defensive sector. And that's what is giving us the valuation in the capital markets. Never thought would get disrupted by D2C brands. So all of a sudden, the barriers to entry in FMCG, which meant high advertising budgets, distribution infrastructure on all India basis, catering to not thousands, but hundreds of thousands of outlets, all that vanished with the emergence of e-commerce. And we've started seeing emergence of so many D2C brands. So what have we done in Marico? We have kept a separate part of the organization which is not attached to the main business. At a separate location, we acquired 3 D2C brands. We also have launched our own brands. So we are viewing this as an area of opportunity. And also, of course, if your current business is going to get impacted, you have to take steps to nullify that threat. But you have to participate in that. That's the only way you learn.
Thank you. Thanks, Harsh. Harsha, I know you're a bit of an ideas man, so you like to anyway think big ideas looking into the future, but what's your approach to setting a goal and navigating it through a little bit the ups and downs of what happens month to month, quarter to quarter?
Cool. So I think we've had a little bit of a journey here, actually, Zaki. Maybe in the first 5-6 years, it would be a lot about these goals and, let's grow 3x, 4x next year. Let's kind of cut costs by like a third or a half by being more efficient, etc. And then I think most founders may go through this. There is a time when the audacious goal kind of is at crossroads with kind of the predictability that is expected of you. So I'll say that we've had our own learnings, and then when some of these things don't go to plan, then you go back to the drawing board and wonder, how do I actually preserve this big ambition without, just suddenly going off on a tangent and coming off with like crazy unpredictability. I think it's great, in the time spans that Nandan mentioned, like 3 years, 5 years, 10, those are like great, these things, but given like our overall journey is 8 years so far, it's the first time we are actually taking a step back to think about like, where should we be in 5 years? So I'll say that like a 5-year range is happening at Swiggy for the first time this year with our management team. But outside of that, it's mostly been a year. In the first few years, it's like 5 years in startup land. So just even managing the ambition for that is like quite crazy.
Understood. So that it was year when you started, and now that started to extend a little bit at the 8-year mark for you.
It was a year for most of your
life, yeah.
So as long as we can remember. But that didn't mean that we were short-term focused. In terms of like things that we put, in terms of the new bets or experimentation approach, etc., that's always been a feature at Swiggy that I think is like our one of our unique, lasting advantage areas. So that part has always been there. It's just that we never made it saying, okay, in year 5 we need to become this big, so let's do this. It's mostly coming from like a love for creation, saying these 4-5 things belong, and there is a world in which consumers may absolutely eat this up. So how do we think about setting ourselves up for that? So there's a long-term thinking, but I won't say it was with a specific horizon and actionability. But now, as of course your core starts to grow at a slower pace than earlier, and then you need to really start having more firm plans that you can work backwards from. That's at least where we are.
Got it. Thank you, Harsha. Binny, I know we worked together, so I know you and Sachin had this crazy habit after every Diwali sale of turning life upside down for all of Flipkart. So tell us a little bit about the way you used to think about bold ambitions and navigating Flipkart through both ups and downs to get there.
Yeah, it was also sort of a journey and evolution for us. So first 4 or 5 years was really, I think, looking more forward, as Nandan said, looking backwards versus forward. So first 4 or 5 years was really looking forward. We are at X, and how do you get to 2X, 3X next year? And first 4 or 5 years, we had sort of a natural momentum because we were starting of a small base. So we were really in a position where supply was catching up to demand. Demand was sort of ahead of supply all the time. And then I think after we became sort of leaders in both both electronics and books, I think was sort of after 5 years of starting Flipkart. That was the first time we realized that now we'll need to do the other sort of way of setting an ambition, that we'll need to probably set forward-looking ambition and work backwards from there, because the natural growth momentum sort of on its own had stopped. And so we started doing that. So I remember very clearly, I think first time we did that was, I think sometime in 2010, 11 or 12, and we were probably at 100 million revenue run rate at that time, and we just, I think, parallel to what Nandan sort of said, we basically set a target that we'll get to $1 billion revenue. Target is sort of $1 billion revenue by 2014, or 15 actually. By 2015, we'll get to $1 billion. And like people went just crazy. Like, how is that going to happen? No, there cannot be so many people buying online in India. And exactly, I mean, just set the target, not knowing how we'll get there. And then, I mean, sort of things happened. Motorola and Xiaomi came in with very different sort of new phones, mobile phones sold in a different way, and we became the main partners. That took off. Then the fashion category started working for us. We bought Myntra as well. And we ended up getting to like the $1 billion almost a year ahead of time, which was, I think, when we put that target out, even we were basically just being very bold and ambitious and trying to sort of get everybody excited about the vision. But I think sometimes, I mean, it can really, really work.
I think one thing I can safely take away from all 4 of your stories is it never seems to get easy. I have many founder friends in the room who said, I just got my unicorn valuation. I wanted to relax a little bit, but life just seemed to have got harder. Nandan, you said 100 million, 1 billion, 10 billion. every time it is something new that you have to go after. Harsh, you talked about a new challenge from D2C coming up. So basically the story is that at any point in time, you've got to be continuously thinking kind of what's next, what's the big goal and how do I get there? And it's not like you ever get to relax as a founder. That sounds like that's the journey all of you have been on. On that, I want to come to one specific aspect of building your companies, which is if you can think back to a tough moment for the company and perhaps in that context for you also personally, which really tested your resilience or you had to really think, how am I going to get through this? You can share an example with us of some such episode in your respective journeys and what happened and how did you get through it? What did it take?
Yeah, so I'll give two examples, one an internal challenge and one an external one. Internal challenge was, we began 40 years back and sometime 6-7 years after the founding, one of our founders wanted to quit. And when we thought we had signed up for a lifetime thing, right? So the fact that one founder wanted to quit itself was traumatic for us. And that we went through a lot of agonizing over that and so on. But I think we were able to deal, but that was an internal challenge of dealing with a founder quitting. The external challenge was when we lost our biggest customer. And it was a substantial part of our revenue. And we had just gone public at that time. So it was just a year after going public. And therefore, there was a lot of consternation as to what will happen. And that actually made us stronger because we realized that we had to be in charge of our own destiny. We had to have a large client base. We didn't want too much dependence on one client. So we put in a lot of resilience through that. But that was a tough time when we had to rebuild from a situation where we had lost our biggest customer. So both are examples, one internal, one external, of how we had to deal with a big event.
And how did you deal with it? So in the management team, I'm sure there was a bit of a shock and a bit of a struggle, but what was the approach to those situations?
Well, I think in the first case, I think after going through a lot of soul searching, we said, let's go for it, let's go for the big time. And also the markets were beginning to open up and we were a small unknown company. And we realized that that was no longer viable. You had to become big and bold and well-known if you want to. So that we changed our minds and brought in a new way of thinking, including thinking backwards from some crazy goals. On the second time, we invested hugely in sales and marketing, building a team, hiring. It was a feet on the street situation. So we had to create a global sales network and so on. And we said we'll never again put ourselves in a situation where we are dependent on one customer who can yank the rug from our feet.
Understood. Thanks, Nandan. Harsh?
So I also have, like Nandan, two, one internal, one external. So first the internal one. I had joined a family business, my father and 3 of his brothers. 3 different businesses in one company, not at all, there's no synergy between those businesses. And I built this business converted the business from unbranded to branded in oils and other consumer products. We had a chemicals business, we had a spice extract business, which was completely exported. And then 3-4 of my cousins that joined business, like there were 8 or 9 family members in business. It was very frustrating for me because I had to attract talent for my business to grow. And I was just not able to do with so many family members. On top of that, our office was located in Masjid Bandar, which is the worst locality on this earth in terms of traffic and congestion. And then there was no way of allocating resources between different businesses. There were a lot of family issues, too many family members in one, there was no role clarity. And I was just getting so stifled and I said, this is not the way. If this is going to be there, I will just not be able to grow. I was spending more time on family issues than resolving it with other businesses rather than concentrating on my own business. So I spent 2 to 3 years by building consensus in the family and trying to demerge these 3-4 businesses into 4 different companies where each me and my cousins will be the CEOs of the company.
You said 3-4 years, Harsh?
It's 3 years, but looking back, that has been the most important decision. If I had tried to rush into things, it would have backfired. And when if your family marriage, this fight start, it's never ending. The business gets destroyed. So I was aware of that, and it took 3 years, and I got the green balls from my cousins, so all of us tried to change and appeal to the elders. Mind you, the business which I had built up was contributing to 80% of the group's profits, but the thinking is that because you build the business, you should get a higher share. But no, I had the same share, like 4 shares, my father and 3 of his brothers. So I think that I was okay. I didn't want a higher share. But it was a management split up where accountability was placed at the top with the family members. So I was the only person from the family then when Marico was formed. That gave me great opportunity to build up a consumer product business. And from that time onwards, I had freedom. I was able to resolve all my issues which were impacting. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge when we went public, post that we had a difference of opinion, so I had to buy my shares of my other uncles, 2 of my uncles, and that also was a bit of a challenge because we were not able to go public, but I'm not covering that. The second challenge was when we started doing well. Levers was doing extremely well, and they had given a big fight to Colgate in the oral care segment, and they had acquired Tomco, Tata Oil Mills Company. As a part of their acquisition, they acquired a coconut oil brand. So they felt that in this segment, they can actually give us a fight. And more than fight, create a scare in our minds and fear that, okay, how can you take on levers? So they did a lot on all that. They spread a lot of word. We had gone public. So in the analyst meet, they had said that we are going to give a big fight because they had given a big fight and they grabbed a huge market share from Colgate in the oral care segment. So the mood in the organization was so down. And on top of that, I go on getting calls from bankers, including a call from the Levers chairman saying that, Mr. Mariwala, please sell out. If you don't sell out, you'll be history. If you sell out, all your future generations are taken care of financially. But I was determined because I knew that, I knew this business inside out. I could take them on. Wherever there were gaps, we were able to overcome these gaps. I even met Karsan Bhai Patel, who had taken a fight in detergents. And I had met a lot of people, it was just not ego, but it was actually a rational kind of a decision to take them on. And it impacted our share prices, just dropped because everybody thought that I was full to take on levers. We did a lot of things in branding, distribution, product quality, and most importantly, the morale of the people, because we had to tell them that we'll take them on. And all that worked. They launched once, 3, 4, 5 times. They got some market share, but not at our cost. And finally, when they were not able to grow beyond a point, they decided to sell the brand. They put it up for auction, and we bought that brand from them. So it was a big source of kind of huge thing for us, because from being acquired by a multinational, we acquired the brand.
That story is, I don't know how many such adversity stories have happy endings like that, Harsh, but I think the message for when you're being taken on full on by a multinational and saying sell out or we're going to finish you, which the intensity of competition is true for many of us in the room today, to stick it out based on basically your personal convictions.
Yeah, and also the fact that you come to a judgment, where will they hit you? They could hit me in terms of advertising spends. Advertising quality, I said, we will match them because we also can think creatively. Yes. Advertising spend, yes, they can outspend me because they were 10 times my size. Distribution, yes. But on the product quality, we had already worked on it, so we didn't see us getting impacted.
And ironically, the team got inspired to better work. That's when some of the emotional advertising around coconut and all of that happened.
Emotional advertising, it forced us to go rural, so our distribution improved because of this threat.
So in both stories, interestingly, the hard times led to a fundamental improvement in the business. In the one case, dependence on customers. In the other, saying we're going to take them on, and 4 aspects of the business fundamentally improved. Great. Harsha?
Cool. So I have a couple. The first one is maybe from year 1, like month 10, month 11. We started our beginnings in just 1 neighborhood, 2 neighborhoods, and maybe some of our early customers will know the way we kind of brought tracking to a food delivery in the early days was when our delivery partner would have to give a missed call to one of 4 numbers. The first missed call was I've confirmed the order. The second one was I've arrived at the restaurant. The third one was at the picked up, and then for delivery. And that's what we used to send consumers. So there was a lot of this, SMS and missed call song and dance that was happening underneath, like whatever we were running, and that was until 400 orders, 500 orders per day kind of scale, and things were just about starting to break, and we weren't adequately prepared for what hit us. There was I guess 1 week when a bunch of college students in Bangalore decided to go take advantage of the new user offer that was around, and that just completely broke our systems, where we went from like maybe 1,000 orders a day to like 2,000 orders a day in a week. And in normal circumstances, you'll say, oh, this is growing, etc. But it was the most depressing week for us because everything we'd built had come undone. And easily it was the most depressing week for us founders, generally team members, to come into office and still be running this. In a week where investors would have said, oh, 2x growth, we were like, okay, should we even be in this business? Maybe we're not fit to run this thing type thing. And then we actually took a call to shut down the business for a day and a half. This was in the middle of like 5 competitors who were all like at the same, this was World War I of food delivery, 2015. So at that time, I think...
Which World War are you on now?
Right now we're in a very, very peaceful phase. Right, so we actually took the decision to shut down the business for a day and a half while we figured out how to bring things back up. Each of the management team, we just launched our new delivery partner app, etc. And then we also had to then go to each hub, and each of us chose like 20, 30 delivery partners who we will help install the app and help them use. And luckily stuff got back up in that day and a half. But it sent a strong message to our team very early on like what mattered and what the management was seeing pride in and like was really, really feeling bad about. The next one, I guess, for me, it had to be the COVID, the first wave. Unlike most other countries in food delivery, every other geography had food delivery grow massively in the face of the pandemic. But for us, we came down to like 10% of our volumes in the first thing. And this was, by the way, just after World War II ended for us. So we had a lot of spending and a lot of investment phase, and just as we ended it and said, let's start now tracing the path back to, to be like way more profitable, and then you get hit with this. I guess it was easily the most painful thing that, I and the company have gone through. It's also because in that short history of 5.5 years, we just had a relatively linear graph. Things just kept going up and up, and at least seemed like. Then I think it was an incredible challenge. We had, even in the first question, I talked about how we'd set up a few new arms to kind of invent and create, and even those weren't firing. Our strike rate was 0 out of the 5 things that we had done until then. And then food delivery was down to 10%. So that was easily the hardest time for Swiggy and for me personally. And to your other question on like, what would I do going back in time to like do some of these things differently? Over the last year and a half, I've had some lucky one-on-one time, even if short, along with each of the panelists here, and I've learned a few things that I want to share. The first one was my chat with Nandan that we met recently, and that's more upstream in terms of how do you kind of keep an eye on things before they actually get into crisis situations. He gave me a great point on, even though as the CEO, you are kind of now expanding your overall reach and you want to be spending on like the longer term, high leverage stuff, you still need to have like a great sampling technique to make sure that everything in the company is like working as you expect it to. And that was like super, super useful for me. Already I've like added it into the Swiggy lexicon in places that I go to, saying, how are we sampling this thing? Second one is after you go through with it, and then when you're in the middle. A brief call, the one call that I had with Binny in 2020, because I knew he'd gone through, similar experiences, and for me that was the first time. And in the first 2 minutes, he said, "Dude, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger." So it was hard to easily take that. You have to go through these experiences sometime and come out of it to be able to say this. Because I was still in that crucible. It's hard to kind of just say, something good will come out of it. But since it was the first really, really destabilizing moment, even though we've had like even more pain coming after, I think the fortitude with which I've dealt with these situations has been very, very different. Just because even though you are in a crucible, to fall in love with that crucible as hard as it is a very useful thing. I think I spent way too much time losing sleep during the first crisis that could have been used productively. So I feel like that's one thing that I've changed. The third thing was from Harsh when I talked to him about, I had heard him in a speech panel around like celebrating failures, etc. When at some point I seemed like the king of failures in a certain month. I was like, how do you manage to do this thing? How do you manage to really support these failures aspect and just keep celebrating it? And had a beautiful talk. And one of the things that he said Marico does with respect to most amazing failure or the award that Marico has, we've now tried to take a leaf out of that for Swiggy, where to just wear it as a badge of honor, even when times are good, just so that people don't have a very smoke and mirrors view of success and failure, instead of like just being balanced throughout. It's, yeah, these were my...
Harsha, this is like you've given us a bounty. You shared your story and then you shared everyone else's story also. So it was like the full package. So one big round of applause to Harsha. I think first time I've seen this on a panel discussion. And sampling technique, most amazing failure, and dude, what doesn't kill you makes you strong. I think all of them have deep resonance in the current environment. So thanks for sharing those. Harsha, Binny, I don't know if Harsha took what you were planning to say, but I know you have more adverse experiences to talk about. Would love to hear yours.
Yeah, and I love them. I think most amazing failure award. I think it's a great idea. We should incorporate it, Psyche. Yeah, so I'll also maybe pick two, one internal, one external. So the internal one was pretty interesting. So 2011 was like a bumper year for us. So we had launched cash on delivery, we had done brand advertising, and we had launched electronics category, and everything worked. So, and books maybe we already had sort of become the leaders, right? So everything worked. We went from 10 million revenue to 100 million in a year, to 10x in a year. And obviously we raised more money and all that. So 2012, we thought, now we've done two categories. Ek kar liya, dusra bhi kar liya. So now we can do N categories. So till then we were like very, very focused on what we wanted to sort of achieve as like the next step, the next goal. But we got carried away. And we created sort of this whole internal issue. So we launched, in 2012, we launched like 5 or 6 new categories of like varying complexity. So from baby care to large appliances to fashion, and all of these categories had like very, very different value chains, very different way of selling them, like everything end to end, from how you sell them to how you deliver them to how you do customer support for them was different. And we didn't think through any of that. And 2012 became like the most miserable year for us. Because not only were we sort of missing our targets every month, we had no idea why we were missing them. Like what was happening in the company at that time. Everybody was sort of lost and confused during the time. And then I think after 2-3 months of this happening, then I think we started sort of digging deeper, and we first had to really come to sort of grips with that, yes, and this was the first time when things were not working for us at Flipkart. Like till then, like Harsha said, right? Everything was just going like this, and this was the first time we were like, okay, what is happening? So firstly, it was just to come to grips with that situation, that okay, that can also happen, was sort of the first. And I think once that happened, then we said, okay, yeah, we need to fix it. And I think it was clear that we were doing too many things. So the first difficult decision we made was, okay, what will we continue and what will we stop and what will we pause? So we actually stopped like 2 or 3 of those categories. Like large appliances was clear, like we needed a separate supply chain to completely like stop that business. And we relaunched, we started building a supply chain, relaunched after 2 years. We paused a few categories and stopped investing in them. And then we said we'll focus on only one new category, which was fashion. From there on, because that is the biggest category, both from revenue and margin and profitability perspective. And then that worked quite beautifully for us for over the next sort of couple of years. So all these were like tough decisions for explaining to the teams that, okay, why is your category getting shut? What are you going to do? And taking the whole organization also through that experience, right? That things are not always going to be up, and how do you come out of it? I think those were sort of super tough times. Second one was a little more external, and I guess somewhat also related to what is happening right now. So end of 2013 to end of 14, I think that was again sort of a golden bull sort of run period in the Indian startup ecosystem, which happened like in the last couple of years. A lot of money came in at that time, and we raised like $1 billion. We became the first company to raise $1 billion round, and then quickly and successively, like within 18 months, our valuation went from 3 billion to 15 billion. And business didn't grow that fast, and that just created a lot of pressure to grow, right? You have to grow into that 15 billion valuation, and we had raised like $2-3 billion, and we started spending a lot of that on trying to just buy growth, and on the external side, Amazon had launched, like the world's biggest competitor, in 2013, and they started spending even more aggressively, and because they had sort of 7-8 years to catch up on us. So they were spending 3 times what we were spending every month. And that's sort of a blank check from Jeff Bezos. So on one side, we had this sort of pressure because we had raised money at a valuation and we had a lot of money in the bank to really grow. And on the other side, we had a competitor which was breathing down our necks in a huge way. So it created, and then by end of 15, I think the markets became sort of cold like they are now. So then we had to really look at what are we going to do? I mean, we have a competitor which is sort of eating away share and slowing our growth. And we also have this pressure from investors to grow. So what do we need to do? And this was the first time we took like a very, very hard call to first reduce burn by almost 55-60%. And not grow for 6 months. Whereas the pressure was to really grow and explain, I think, explain and align investors and the team as well that this is what we will do. And to really then also, again, get very focused on things we were good at and we thought we will definitely win and we need to win. And to then also let go a little bit of the things we thought the competition was good at. So some of the categories we said, let the competition win. And there was again fashion and electronics was probably the 2 categories we said we'll double down on and will not let go. So we were able to reduce burn, not grow for 6 months. And I think once that happened, then the sort of Diwali time came around. Our team did a really good job of creating momentum during that period in the business. We invested back from what the money we had saved, all the burn we saved. Once we saw sort of the traffic and growing Geo also launched, I think that played a big role as well in increasing sort of the market size. And then we started going back again. That was like a super, super tough period for everyone in the company.
Yeah, but I think there's a degree of personal honesty about what the situation is. And not just being brave, but foolhardy, but being brave, but honest about what needs to change in the business. I think that's a common pattern amongst all your stories. I'm going to throw it open to the audience for some questions in a few minutes, but 1 or 2 questions more from me before I do that. I'm going to stir the pot, some safe questions so far, so we're going to get a little bit more exciting. Would like a little bit of a debate between growth and profitability, and how we feel about, in the current environment in particular, how important it is to build a fundamentally profitable business versus how should we think about it? It is still important to grow if you're in an early stage of growth for the company. How do you make that trade-off, particularly when you know that funds may not be as easy to come by? And how do you balance that equation between growth and profitability?
Well, I believe in growth and profitability. And I think that question of growth or profitability comes only if the basic unit economics are not correct. But if your economics are such that you are making money on every sale, then you're going to both grow and be more profitable. So I think if we can focus on getting that right, then the rest follows. And I believe, and I think this current situation will show that, I think ultimately you have to be in charge of your destiny. which means that you have to earn the money for your future. Otherwise, if you are depending all the time on capital from outside, then you are dependent upon the vagaries of the market, vagaries of fundraising, vagaries of whatever is happening now. And so the sooner you get to a point where you earn your way, I believe that's where it should be. So I don't see that as a contradiction. I think with the right model, you can do both.
Thanks, Nandan. Harsh?
So to me, growth is very important because it excites all stakeholders, whether it is shareholders, employees, associates, even society, because you're growing fast and you're adding value to each stakeholder. But that growth has to be sustainable. You don't want 1 year growth, next year fall, and also profitable over a period of time. You can't have unprofitable growth for all the time. So I am coming from old school of, so we always have that, both of us maybe, that you have to have the visibility of profits. You can't say that I will make profits after 20 years. To me, that's not acceptable.
But having said that, Harsh, I do want to probe a bit further on that, because you have built new businesses, new countries, new categories, which have not been immediately profitable.
So you're
how did you
absolutely
navigate?
right, but I can see for a new product, normally my mindset is 5 years I will go on sacrificing. And my sacrifice is mainly creating demand, advertising and things like that. For new business, I have a 10-year mindset that, okay, for 10 years I don't mind investing. It cannot be 20, 30 years. Beyond a point, then it's very difficult to predict beyond 5, 10 years whether you will make profits or not. And if at all you are not sure of making a profit in a new product, you should withdraw rather than continuing with the hope that you will make profit just because you're growing.
So you have a time frame of, say, 5 years.
5 years for new products, maybe 10 years for new business. For a new country, like we went to Bangladesh, we had a 7-year time frame that we should organically, we should grow, because initial years you want growth. You want scale. Unless you have scale, unless you have market leadership, you will not make good money. Scale and market leadership brings you that economies of scale. You are getting profits which are higher than the industry profits.
Correct. Thanks, Harsh. Harsha?
So, I actually don't have a very different... I don't have a very different view at all. We've been around for 7 years.
But that pause was...
The startup ecosystem hasn't
like
been
the
around.
gap between your and Harsh's chair felt a bit bigger for a moment.
No, actually, you'd be surprised. I have the same time horizons as Harsh for profitability. Just doesn't seem like it. Perception is different, but it is 5 to 7 years is the outer limit of anything new that we take up. Obviously, the first thing that we took up, we also had our own learnings and the bunch of mistakes that you make when you do this the first time, which meant that it was longer. But yeah, that way there is no misalignment at all. But I also think that there are some categories and then there are some categories. Even if I were to build like a completely new edition of Swiggy again in today's world, I think the businesses that we have do have a lot of time to market, opportunity costs in these, and sometimes you just can't exactly play these things the way.
So in your mind, Harsha, is there a minimum threshold of scale, to Harsh's point also saying I have to get there to be meaningful? After that, at that point, after that we can start thinking about balancing an and as opposed to an or. Is that what you've sort of now seen over the years?
That's absolutely the way we do see it, Saki. Even with, let's say, our newer business like Instamart, we launched it less than a couple of years back. And I guess within the first 12, 15 months, there were 4 more new players who kind of showed up in the space. That's what I mean by time to market. We got 12 or 15 months of a heads up, which is great, because we got the time to learn and we got to build some early scale before everyone jumped in on it. But it's just not like you can play it saying, this category I can play 5, 6 years and the long game. There may be some others where you have like such a captive source of power that allows you to play longer game. And in fact, we are as a company trying to just think about explorations, spending more of our time on these instead of just saying, tuck, 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 everything tethered to a dude on a bike. So it will take that kind of stretch in your own mind in terms of how you are exploring in line with the company's mission to shape some things more deliberate.
Correct. Thanks, Harsha. Binny?
Yeah, I think, so for us it was growth and profitability for the first 3 years. We were bootstrapped. And then we raised venture capital, and the rest is history. But I think, yeah, I think it is, I kind of agree with, I think the models there, if you think about the Flipkart business, there are various parts of the business. It's not one business. And so you have to really also know which parts are mature and should be profitable, and are they sort of profitable? What is sort of your eventual sort of unit economics design, where you want to get to in your new businesses, and how are you going to get there, and what time period and what budgets have you allocated, can you allocate, can you afford to get there, and then take decisions based on whether you're going there or not. And I think depending on your access to capital, you have to sort of keep allocating capital to either adjacent categories or new stuff. Like for us, we were very clear that payments was a huge potential adjacent. I would not call it adjacency, but huge sort of opportunity that a company like Flipkart could go after, although it was not very adjacent to our business. And we tried, PhonePe was the third try for us in payments. So we first tried it inside Flipkart with PayZippy, killed it within 1.5 years. Then we bought another company in 2015 and bought like majority stake in that. That didn't go anywhere. And then thanks to Nandan for inventing UPI, Rahul and Samir started working on the PhonePe concept based on UPI, and we took a bet on that. And that's created, like, I think, tremendous sort of value for Flipkart and for the entire ecosystem as well. So I think it is sort of also a question of capital allocation. And I think in sort of mature businesses, really, having a time frame and managing the capital you have.
Thanks, Binny. I have one more question I would love to ask, but I'm going to throw it open to the audience at this point. If I get a chance, I will ask it before our time is up. But we have mics circulating. If you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and a mic will come to you. Yes, if you can, before you ask the question, please introduce yourself. Just your name and your company, please.
I'm Satish. I run India's first omni-channel marketplace, giving visibility to products available in stores across the country. Okay. My question is to Mr. Nandan. Okay. Primarily, what kind of challenges do you see in ONDC getting to a population scale, just like the UPI is doing?
No, obviously, ONDC will be far more complex than payments, because payments is just transfer of value. It's a pure digital transaction. Here it's a physical transaction of goods and services, and it's a multi-party transaction with accountability has to be clear, returns, handling this, that, dispute resolution. So I think the number of challenges are more, but we are confident it can be cracked. So I think if you do it, it'll be a game-changing event. So that's what we're hoping. But it's more complex, definitely, than payments.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Ganesh. I represent a startup called Stylomia. My question is, whenever you go through as a startup a tough situation, right? And as a culture, we would like to be transparent, right? But as a founder, do you hold back transparency to deliver a bad news too quickly because it can upset the team in some form? And have you had situations where you held back and delayed the information, or what do you do?
Thanks. Who'd like to take that? Harsha? Harsha is good with the pauses, so I thought I'll...
No, I think it's a great question. I actually asked Psyche once in 2019 on such a complex topic on how to manage this. So I think there is, ultimately you have to go to sleep feeling okay with your actions. And a lot of this is also shaping at like, how do you, is that transparency helpful? Sometimes, because transparency, like, plain vanilla means like telling something the first moment you know it. Another is there is a last responsible time to be transparent. There's sometimes like a definitely earlier responsible time. So I think it's a fairly subjective question. I have no framework for, but to not be transparent is not an option. When things have happened, when you're going to talk about it, like, you know, how do you do a layoff conversation? How do you do like a cost-cutting conversation? Are you taking responsibility for your actions? These are these things. But if you're saying that the moment, like, you know, you have to cut costs, are you going to put it in the next town hall saying, hey guys, I may come back in 4 months talking about something? It's honestly not productive, because a lot of these things can change and you're constantly making a plan. So it's a very twisted subject that I don't have clear answers for, except that transparency and authenticity is what your leaders and your teams here to stay around you, and they always can tell you at the end of an exercise or at the end of the comms how they perceive the leadership. And I'm sure even with like the stuff that xto10x runs in surveys, etc., you'll be able to find out and get feedback. Yeah, I think we have, I think a lot more judgment is needed with the timing of the transparency like I talked about, but when you get through to it, there's no option except like completely going through with the why and being authentic, because just coming out of that half an hour looking good is going to create pain for the next few years.
Got it.
One time your authenticity is lost, then it's lost in a very, very serious way. There's no getting it back easily.
Yeah, well said, Harsha.
Thanks,
you.
Harsha. Just in case there is
Anything anyone would like to add?
Sure.
No, I fully agree with him that it has to be transparent at some stage, but it's a very interesting question.
With a degree of thoughtfulness.
Set me thinking, you know, when will I share, will I wait for some time? A lot depends, as you were saying, very subjective. Sometimes it may be better to hold off for a few days, just be sure about it, depending on what issue it is.
So it is non-negotiable, but thoughtfulness and timing need to play into that. I think that's a very thoughtful answer. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pradeep Basu, and I run a company, satellite image analytics company called SatSure. My question is to Nandan sir. One of the key things that our company enables is financial inclusion of smallholder farmers. Now, unfortunately, the lending products are linked to land, especially in agriculture, and the entire piece of land digitization is very broken. As there is more and more aggregation of this land digital land parcels happening, and companies like us who are scoring and rating and improving the risk perception on top of that digital infrastructure happening, there is a lot of debate going on about the violation of privacy of farmers. Obviously, while it's a debate that we should have, it does end up slowing down the pace at which the adoption of something which is very essential also for another problem to be solved happens. Now, I'm sure that when you were driving the Aadhaar program, these questions would have arose. So I would love to hear the critical points that one should think of while designing solutions which are at the intersection of poverty versus data privacy.
Well, first of all, privacy comes in when there is personally identifiable information, and it's not clear to me what it will be in a farming situation. I mean, if you want the farmer to, for example, get a loan, if he digitizes his purchase of raw materials, seeds and fertilizer, and if he digitizes his sales on the consumer side, then you have a digital footprint of his business very effectively, which can be the basis for the loan. So instead of giving a loan on asset collateral, you're giving a loan on information collateral. So I don't see much of a privacy issue. Privacy issue comes when your personal information is bandied about. So I don't see that as an issue. In fact, when we did the Aadhaar thing, we also went through the second longest case in the history of the Indian Supreme Court. The Aadhaar case was the longest case, second longest case. And finally, the judgment was very clear that there was no privacy issue at all, because the thing is always about a trade-off. If the benefit of something exceeds the cost, or if the benefit is large enough, then some amount of circumspection of privacy is okay. That's what the Supreme Court held. So I think these are all, we have to strike a balance between these two. But I think if you are doing something which is going to change the lot of millions of farmers, and if those farmers are going to make more income because of technology, I think all the very best to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Udayan. I am co-founder of a company called Clearco. We are into air purification, carbon capture, that industry. So my question is to Nandan sir. So sir, like you work with the government also, and like you mentioned, like one example, when after demonetization, suddenly the UPI took off. So in this context, now we are in a phase like we very much believe that climate change is something which is a very important and very difficult problem which we have to solve from now, and net zero and all this stuff is going on. So do you believe the government should come up with some guidelines where this should be done? Because as a company, when we go and pitch to customers and our investors as well, so they are very circumspect about why should they pay for clean air or why should they pay for carbon capture. And if the government comes up with some guidelines, that will be really, helpful for us also. So what is your view on that, and how soon can we expect something like this?
Well, I think there are two parts to it. One is subsidies and the other is market externalities, right? I mean, the reason why you don't do carbon capture is because there's no price on carbon. If there's a price on carbon, then you have an economic incentive to do carbon capture. So that requires carbon taxes and carbon markets to put a price and bring into the market something that is now outside the market. That is a government policy thing. And the second thing is subsidies. And if you subsidize hydrocarbon with a lower price, then it's very difficult to get rid of it. So one of the things we have done is DBT. So DBT, what happens is that earlier when you bought a cylinder, you got it at a low price. Now the cylinder is sold at market price, and the subsidy is given as a cash subsidy into your bank account. So we unbundle the subsidy from the market price of the product. The advantage of that is tomorrow if the government wants to subsidize solar power, they can say you buy the cylinder at market price, but the subsidy will give you on solar. So then you can use government subsidy and incentives to switch behavior. So both these things have to happen to really use government policy to drive your consumption.
There's a question here.
Hi. Can I go first? 1 second. I'm here. On your right. Yeah. Hi, my name is Tushar. I'm a reporter with Financial Express. Gentlemen, firstly, thank you so much for the very exciting panel discussion. I have a question. All of you spoke about frugality, right? But Harsha, I want to understand from you, how do you approach frugality, right? How do you concentrate on reducing your cash burn? And because Nandan and you had very interesting views, contradictory views on that, I just want to hear from you, Harsha, first, and then Nandan, please. Thank you.
Sure. So firstly, we contemplated frugality. I mean, obviously, after the first few years, saying should it be a company value? If so, what kind of messages does it drive? More than frugality, the mantra for Swiggy is like do more with less, instead of just saying do with less. In terms of how do we manage our cash burn, it is a function of what is the runway, what is the ambition, are we spending it well enough, and is the team executing on the plan well enough? So unfortunately, there's no silver bullets for how to manage that.
I love that, Harsha. Do more with less rather than just do less is a good, nice one to remember. Thank you. I think there was a question at the back. Maybe we have time for one more question. I think you've been waiting for a while.
My name is Trivesh. I'm a chartered accountant and represent a firm called Singvi Devanonni. This is to all the panel. How important is the role of a competitor? Is it important to push to kill the competitor, or it actually drives you to maybe do better in terms of quality, product, delivery, and execution as a whole?
Harsh, you want to take that one?
See, I think competition is always good as long as it's a healthy competition. You don't want somebody else doing things in an unlawful manner or something which is not done in the right context. I think that's because that competition actually forces you to do things innovatively, doing it quicker, agility. How can you beat that? Challenge comes in the organization. You need challenge in the organization. People like to have a challenge in their own jobs. So I'm all for healthy competition. And I think competition is very necessary in the Indian environment. I think the competition is much lesser. than many other developed markets. It's going to happen much more with so many startups and all. So we will have to stay with competition. There is no doubt about it. Now, if you're not good and you get suffered because of that, then you have to be blamed because, in an open environment, you have to be at the top of things. So then don't blame a competition because you got wiped out for whatever reason. If that competition is healthy. Now, if it is not healthy, then it's a different ballgame.
Thank you. Harsh, we'll leave it there. Sorry, I know there are a lot more questions, but we have to respect the time for the panelists as well. So I want to thank all of you for both an extremely insightful but also very thoughtful conversation. And even speaking on behalf, that moment will stay with me, Harsha, that you presented an insight from everyone else in the panel. So that's going to stay with me for a while. So thanks to each of you, Nandan, Harsh, Harsha, and Binny for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll take 30 more seconds to get started. Everybody, can we please get seated? We'll begin with our next section. People at the back, can we please get seated?
Sonali, should we move on to the next section?
Yes.
The next section is called SEL.
SEL.
That's right.
We've heard about IPL. What is SEL?
So in short, Sonali, SEL stands for Startups Employees Love.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure many of us are intrigued here, Teja, to know more about Startups Employees Love.
So here at xto10x, we wanted to identify and celebrate companies and individuals who are doing exceedingly well in their people and culture practices. As part of this program, we worked with 150 startups. 50,000 employees took the surveys conducted by xto10x. These surveys gave us 2.5 million data points. And post-analyzing these data points, we have identified 12 champions in people and excellence practices in the startup ecosystem. And tonight, we want to identify them and celebrate them through awards.
So, Teja, did I hear you correctly? You said 150 startups and 50,000 plus employees participated in SEL?
You heard me right, Sonali. And given the feedback and interest that we have received this year, next year is only going to be double or triple of this number.
Amazing. And I think I heard something about awards. So are the best-in-class companies getting awarded today? Like real awards?
Sonali, just turn around and have a look at that beauty. Every one of the winners tonight is going to get that award. And I wish I could get one too.
You wish had you started a company and built it with a great cultural fabric, I'm sure you would be in the nominations. SEL is a badge of honor that many startups and founders here would want to wear proudly.
And tonight is not only about awards, we also want to share the insights that we got as part of this program with the rest of the people here for the benefit of the ecosystem.
And are those the 7 secrets of startups employees love?
Bingo, Sonali. And who other than Binny Bansal,
to talk about it more. Binny, if you can please have you on stage.
Very good evening, everyone. I'm super excited, and thank you so much for joining us for the first edition of the Startups Employee Love Awards. I think this is something. This journey started, I think, 2 years back when we started working with some of the companies on how to really scale culture in a company. And at xto10x, we really want to. Our objective is very simple, right? It is to make scaling easier for founders. And we want to do that by building capabilities, platforms that the entire ecosystem can use. So we started thinking in that direction that what can we really build which can help companies scale their culture. And from my own experience in building Flipkart, I think if you ask me, I mean, people ask me, like, what were the 2 or 3 biggest reasons for your success? I think culture would sort of definitely be in the top 3. And I think today it's even more important. I mean, when we started Flipkart, we were sort of one of the first startups. We were fighting for talent, mostly not with other startups, but with large sort of MNCs and other companies. But today there is a talent war. All of you are fighting. And the only way to win it in the long term is to really create the best culture, a culture which attracts talent that is relevant to you. And I think that is something which we struggled a lot at different times. In Flipkart, we made a lot of mistakes. We got a lot of things first wrong, then right. And as I've been working with a lot of founders over the last 7-8 years, I saw a lot of the same, founders facing a lot of the same issues as well. So at Flipkart, we had developed this thing called Employee Net Promoter Score concept. And that changed my life as a founder. Like, for the first time, I sort of knew what was working from a culture standpoint in the company, what was not working, and what I could focus on. And that is what we have built now for the entire ecosystem. It is basically to make culture measurable and to make it easy for founders to understand what to focus on. We have broken down culture into 7 secrets, 7 components. And by knowing what is out of the 7, which ones are working well in your company, which ones are not working well, you can really, really get very, very laser sharp focused as a leadership team, as a founding team, and improve culture, improve your employee value proposition, and attract and retain the best talent that you can. And by looking at all this data that was presented, I think we saw a lot of interesting insights. I think one of the biggest revelations was that there is a huge variation in eNPS in the ecosystem, the lowest being +3 and the highest being 97. So there is a lot of room for improvement for a lot of companies on that. And I think everybody can really learn a lot from companies which are doing this well, from each other. We have also, and we have also captured those 7 secrets in a book, the 7 secrets of startups employees love. This is the book I have in my hands. All of you will get a copy of this book today. I'm not going to tell you what the 7 secrets are. You should read the book for that. And so without further delay, I would like to invite Harsh and Harsha back on stage to launch the book. I guess, yeah. Okay. Yes. Oh, okay. So should we wait or? Yeah, so they'll just be back. We'll just wait a couple of minutes for them. Harsha, can you join me on stage?
Thanks, Harsha. Thanks, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Harsha, Harsh and Binny, for unveiling the book.
So this brings us to the final section of the evening, the SEL Awards.
Today we have 4 categories of awards. By the end of the evening, we will know which are the startups that are most stand out on people practices, who are the best managers in Indian startup ecosystem, which are the startups which are best workplaces for women, and finally, the mother of all awards, the startups that are best on people excellence. And what do we mean by it? Basically, these startups have the highest employee net promoter score that Binny just talked about.
Wow, can't wait to find out the winners. For this, I would like to invite Avinash, who's part of our People Excellence team, to talk about the nominees and the winners. Avinash, if we can have you on stage, please.
Good evening, everyone. This is Avinash here from the People Excellence team of xto10x. I'll be talking to you today about people practices. So firstly, what are people practices? They make the culture real for the employees in the company. They govern everything, right from when an employee is hired, to how the performance gets assessed, to how the employee grows in the company. So we clearly feel that this is of primal importance. But we also asked the employees, the startup ecosystem, in terms of what they feel about it. Employees who feel that the policies are not employee friendly have an average ENPS of minus 51. That's right, minus 51. So they clearly agree with us on this. And that's exactly the reason as to why this is the first category of awards we'd like to begin with. The best people practices across the startup ecosystem. Before getting into the nominations and the awards, we'd like to talk about some best people practices across 3 major themes: communication, rewards, and work-life balance. Starting off with communication, let me start with asking you a question. How frequently do you do an all hands? So I hear once a year, twice a year, and also someone say daily. So what if I ask you to do it weekly, right? Now the startups who've done it on a weekly basis over a period of time have managed a 10x improvement in collaboration and mission alignment for all the employees. Moving on to rewards. Now employees who feel that they're not rewarded fairly have an ENPS of minus 10. The central theme around rewards design over here is fairness. How do you make rewards fair for all the employees? The best way to do it is to ace them. Alignment, comprehensiveness, and explaining them very well to the employees. You align it to competencies and OKRs. You have a comprehensive rewards framework in place when you optimize for each and every reward lever that you have. And the most important part is the communication piece. When you explain the philosophy and the framework basis which the rewards get determined, so that it's no more a black box for the employees. Moving on to the third aspect, which is work-life balance. So again, the employees who feel they have a poor work-life balance have an ENPS of -24. Now, I'm sure all of us resonate with the fact that gets super intense, especially in early and growth stage startups in terms of the overall work. Now, it's important for us to look at this as a long-term game and not a short-term game, as a marathon and not a sprint. We need to optimize this so that employees have enough breaks, they get enough intervals to rejuvenate themselves. And this can be done through some very strong rituals, such as quarterly long weekends, probably a company-wide shutdown every year, and policies like unlimited leaves. Now, it's not just about having a policy of unlimited leaves in place, but also create a culture which is receptive of this, and which respects the employees and encourages them to take leaves on a periodic basis. So the bottom line is, while each of these high-impact people practices have their own pros and cons, we'd like you to think deeply about designing your people practices perfectly aligned with your culture and business context. So with that said, we'd now like to celebrate the startups who have done extremely well on this front. So can I please invite Binny onto the stage? So we'll be going through the nominees in 4 groups based on the number of employees in the startup. So the first group is 0 to 50 employees. Can we have the nominations, please? So the nominations for best people practices, 0 to 50 employees. Anar, can we please have a round of applause for the nominees? Arya Technologies, Transact, Unbox Robotics, and Vani.coach.
And the winner for best people practices is Vani.coach.
Can I please request the founders of Vani.coach to come onto the stage? So the next group is best people practices, 50 to 200 employees. Can we have the nominations, please? So the nominations are Cloud SEK, Fasal, Legality, Raho, and Texpian.
The winner is Legality.
Can we please have the founders on the stage, please? So the next group is best people practices, 200 to 500 employees. And the nominations are AgroStar, Airmeet, Bizongo, FT Cash, Rippler, Springworks, and Servergram.
The winner in the 200 to 500 category is Springworks.
Can we please have the founders on the stage, please? Any representation from Spring Works? Moving on to the final group of 500 plus employees. The nominations are ACO, Cred, LoadShare, MediBuddy, and REA India.
The winner in the 500 plus category is REA India.
May I please have the founder on the stage. Thank you so much, Binny, for doing the honors. You can please take your seat. So congratulations to all the winners and congratulations to all the nominees. All of you are taking great strides in making people practices better in the startup ecosystem. With that said, we'd like to now move on to the next category, and I'd hand it over to my colleague Sneha to take it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Avinash. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sneha, and I'm part of the People Excellence team at xto10x. I'm here to introduce the category of awards for Best Startups for Women. Just about a third of the employees in the startup ecosystem are women. Now, I won't debate if that's a good or bad thing, but I want to highlight that this number reduces with seniority. Among leaders, the percentage of women is less than 20. And when you look at founders, that number goes down to a single digit. It's not just that. Women employees are also less happy and less fulfilled compared to their male colleagues. Their ENPS is a full 18 points lower. The reason we have introduced this category of awards is to shine a light on the issues that women face in their workplaces, start a conversation around what are some of the things that we can do to make our organizations more welcoming for women, and of course to recognize and celebrate those who are already making a stride in that direction. Before I move on to the nominations and awards, I want to share some insights on why women are unhappy. Number one, with our leadership roles in startups being so skewed towards men, women feel there aren't enough opportunities for them to grow. Having benefited from the presence of strong leaders as role models at the start of my career, I know what a big difference that can make to boost self-confidence, especially when you are in the minority. That brings me to the second reason, which is that women don't feel heard in their organizations. When you're the only woman, especially at a junior level in a room filled with men, it is very difficult for you to voice your opinion. Again, seeing outspoken managers speaking confidently in rooms filled with men, I know something about what a positive influence these women are missing out on. The third reason are the small inconveniences that add up to make women feel that their organizations don't value them. Now, this can be something as basic as inadequate washroom facilities, or rigidity in work timings, or even no maternity leaves in an organization. The fourth reason is that women feel unsafe in the workplace, especially when male camaraderie or male banter degenerates into abusive language, or a woman has to face an offensive customer. When there are no posh policies or there's no forum for a woman employee to raise her concerns, this lack of safety gets aggravated. But I also have some good news, and that is that as organizations hire more women leaders, some of these issues start getting noticed and fixed. We have also seen that as the percentage of women leaders in organizations goes up, the overall ENPS increases. Now, on that note, I want to introduce the nominations and the awards for this category. Harsha, I request you to come on stage to do the honors, please. The nominees for Best Startups for Women among startups with less than 50 employees are eShips, Healthy Sure, Slurp Farm, Transact, Vani.coach.
Okay, the winner is Vani.coach.
May I
Congratulations.
request the founder of Vani.coach to please come on stage? Congratulations to Vani. The nominees for the Best Startups for Women among startups with 50 to 200 employees are Legality, SAS Labs, Texpian, Vahan, and Fasal.
Okay, the winner is Legality. Congratulations.
May I request the founder of Legality to please come on stage? Congratulations to Legality. The nominees for Best Startups for Women among startups with 200 to 500 employees are Airmeet, Bizongo, Entry, Moneyview, and Springworks. We have 2 winners in this category. I request Harsha to read out both the names.
Hi, the winners are Airmeet and Entry.app. if I'm pronouncing.
May I request the founder of Airmeet to please come on stage? The founder of Entry could not be with us today because of an emergency. We will pass on our wishes and the award to them later. The nominees for Best Startups for Women among startups with more than 500 employees are Grow, MediBuddy, Meesho, ShipRocket, and Sunstone Eduversity.
And the award goes to Grow. That's
May I request the founder of Grow to come on stage, please? Thank you, Harsha, for doing the honors. Congratulations to all the winners. I now call my colleague Chaitanya to introduce the next category of awards.
Thank you, Sneha. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Chaitanya, and I'm part of the People Excellence team here at xto10x. Good managers are the biggest drivers of employee happiness at work. Now, a lot of times we hear people say that my experience with my manager is my experience of the organization. Our data now shows that this is indeed true. We've looked at feedback for over 8,000 managers in the ecosystem, and there's a clear pattern. As the manager recommendation index falls, so does the ENPS of the organization, which is the Employee Net Promoter Score of organizations. Which means that your managers are the biggest drivers of your organization's satisfaction. And that's the reason we've decided to introduce this category of awards to recognize some of the best managers in the startup ecosystem today. Now, before we talk about the winners, we wanted to spend a few minutes looking at what makes managers great. So we asked this question to the ecosystem, and this is what employees had to share. Employees spoke about great managers being one, who carry a deep functional knowledge to lead the teams. They spoke about great managers being people who are available for the team to help them in problem solving. They also spoke about great managers being people who deeply care about their teams beyond the transactional nature of work. And finally, these are managers who have regular conversations with the team, particularly doing one-on-one conversations at least once a week. So in summary, mentors, not taskmasters, seems to be the mantra that a lot of these managers are able to crack. Not surprisingly, not all managers get this right. There are about 20% of managers in the ecosystem who have their scores in deep red when it comes to their manager approval rating. Why, you may ask? About 23% of employees feel that their managers do not value their opinion. About 22% of employees feel that their manager was unfair while dealing with the team. And about 18% of employees in the ecosystem feel that their manager does not even have the technical knowledge to lead the team. Shocking, right? Now this problem becomes particularly worse when people are made first-time managers and they're not equipped with the right skills and training required to lead teams. That's when the teams suffer the most. Now, today is about recognizing managers who've got it right. There are over 179 managers in the ecosystem who've got a perfect approval rating of 100. And we'd like to call out all the names here. Yeah. We of course couldn't have all of them here, but a big round of applause, please. We'll send across our wishes to all of the managers and hope they continue to uphold this going forward. All right, for the next section, I'll call upon my manager, Arun, to lead us. Arun, I didn't see your name in the list. I'm not sure what happened, but...
You better recommend me, Chaitanya. Performance reviews are around the corner, by the way. Okay, jokes aside, hope all of you are having a good time. Hi, everyone. I'm Arun. I lead the people team at xto10x. The reason why we did the entire Startups Employee Love program is because we want to recognize startups that have cracked the culture code. These are high ENPS startups that have great teams and also a great culture. Before I announce the nominees and the winners, I want to spend some time talking about what makes them truly great. And these are also the 7 secrets which we have been talking about. Binny talked about them. So without much delay, I'm going to get to that. What are those 7 secrets which can help you get to a great workplace? Number 1, great managers. I'm going to take over from where Chaitanya left us. The number 1 determinant of a happy team. Top quartile companies do 2 things. 1, they measure. They run barometer surveys which share feedback continuously with managers, but they don't stop there. That is also linked to performance reviews, promotions, which creates a positive reinforcing loop. Number 2, I've seen them invest a lot in capability building programs, boot camps, especially for the first time managers, to equip them with the basic tools and techniques needed for them to do simple things like one-on-one conversations, performance reviews, etc. Secret number 2, make everyone mission aligned. Teams should feel that they are part of something epic. The metric here is people who don't have a sense of pride have an ENPS of -87. -87. Good news is that most of the startups do this really, really well. We look at standout startups, where greater than 98% of people feel that they have a sense of pride. There is one common pattern which came up. They all write it down. They all write down what makes them special. It doesn't stop there. They also do a great job of talking about it and also living it day in, day out. In fact, there's an interesting metric called say-do ratio, which some of these companies track to look at the adherence to the manifesto or the constitution document they put down. Secret number 3, help your team members balance between work and life. I'm pretty sure a lot of you would be thinking like, is it even a factor relevant to the startup ecosystem, right? Because a lot of founders ask that to me when I do the ENPS debriefs. I also used to get baffled. So we went and looked at the data, the startups who do this really well. And it's the same thing which Nandan was talking about it earlier, right? They all looked at it in a single way. It's a marathon and not a sprint, which means like marathon have breaks, and they also do breaks in some shape or form. A 3-day weekend at the end of the quarter, 10-day vacation at the end of a year, a roster system to give that extra 1 day off to your operational workforce. These are all practices which, and this is not about a 9-to-5 job at all. This is about like giving those breaks. Secret number 4, women representation in leadership. Sneha talked about it. One more golden metric I want to add. The experience gap or the ENPS gap between men and women in the company shouldn't exceed 5 in any team. And if it exceeds, you should ensure that you go and solve for it. Secret number 5, ace your reward system. Avinash talked about it. Make it aligned, comprehensive, explain it well. Another one of those topics where founders ask me, hey Arun, are people ever happy with rewards? So sounds very intuitive. So we went and spoke to 200 people who strongly disagreed to the question, am I being rewarded fairly? Any guesses on what is the top theme which came about? Yeah, money, pay more. That was actually the last theme which came. In fact, the top theme which came was unfairness. I do the same job as this person. I get paid X, this person gets paid 2X. And also the second one is that it's a black box. I get some percentage hike, I get some ESOPs, and I don't understand about them, and I think ESOPs is paper money. So you should do exactly this, aligned, comprehensive, and explain it well. And of course, the book you will get will also have more details on that. Secret number 6, think employees before company while designing any policy. Here, top quartile companies have a standing OKR. I have seen this as a standing OKR. Roll out 2 standout policies every quarter. Or sometimes it is a revamp 1 or 2 policies, what is top of mind for people. This is a low-hanging fruit. Out of all what I have talked about, this is a low-hanging fruit. In fact, in a ENPS transformation engagement we were doing with this 2,000 member unicorn, this was the one which actually moved the needle by 10 points immediately. And after that, the structural work sort of, it takes it 6 months, 1 year, and people also want to see some quick changes. Secret number 7, build a fast and autonomous decision-making system. Not a great deal for small companies, but as the companies become bigger, people look for autonomous roles, and even more, people understand that they may not be part of the key decision-making process, but at least explain the rationale behind why this decision changed from the last week when you announced something else. Right? So those are the 7 secrets. You would see them in a chart. Think of almost as like the steps to be taken to go from a bottom quartile company to a top quartile company, or from wherever you are to get to wherever you want to. And you will also find more details in the book, and we can also more than happy to have a chat offline on. We have a lot more insights on each of these topics. Now, without further delay, I want to get to the nominees and the winners for the grand prize for today. For that, I request Harsh to come onto the stage to give away the trophies. Thank you. Thanks, Harsh. Okay, I'm going to start with the first category. Startup employees love, with 0 to 50 employees. There are 5 nominees: Anar, Slurp Farm, Transact, Twid, Vani.coach.
So the winner is Anar Business Community App.
The second category is startup employees love, with 50 to 200 employees. The nominees are City Flow, Legality, Man Company or Helios, Rupify, SAS Labs and Texpian.
And the winner is, I think, third time, Legality. Second or third time, right?
The third category, Startup Employees Love with 200 to 500 employees. The nominees are Airmeet, Bizongo, Rippler, Sarvagram, Springworks, and Zestmoney. We have two winners in this category. Request Harsh to call out both the winners.
So, number one, Springworks. It's not one, two, both are
Yeah,
joint.
correct. Both
Same.
are winners.
And Bizongo.
I request the founders of Bizongo to first come on stage, and then after that, Springworks. The last category is Startups Employees Love with 500 plus employees. The nominees are Acco, Cred, Grow, Misho, and REA Group.
So the winner is, I think, second time, REA India.
Thank you. Thanks, Harsh.
Harsh, if you'd stay back on stage. So we invite all the winners today on stage for a group photograph. We also request Harsha, Saiki, Neeraj, Binny, and to also be back on stage for a group photograph with all the winners. A big round of applause for the winners today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being such a great audience. And once again, many congratulations to the winners. We have printed copies for each one of you in the room today of the book, The 7 Secrets of Startups Employees Love. You can, before leaving for the day, you can collect a copy from the registration desk or from any of the X to10X team members. On that note, I invite Psyche on stage to pass the closing remarks for the summit today. Request everybody to get seated. This is the last section, which is a closing section by Psyche. Let's give a big round of applause.
It's not much of a section, to be honest. Don't get too nervous. I'm going to let you go for drinks and dinner very quickly. So it's mostly some housekeeping announcements. I think it was an absolute pleasure to listen to the conversations. I'm not going to summarize it because all of you have just heard it literally half an hour ago. But we're particularly proud of starting the SEL Awards this year and recognizing some outstanding companies. And we personally also, as xto10x, have been learning a lot from what all of them do. So thanks, guys, for the inspiration. I think a really job well done by all the companies who won today. One request to all of you, in case you want to participate, this costs nothing. Participating in the SEL process is absolutely free for everyone, and it comes with some really deep insights into how your company really works and which parts of the company need attention in terms of improving people excellence. If you want to participate, there's a QR code, I think, pretty much everywhere. You can scan the QR code, you can say, I'm interested, and we'll sign you up for next year. And hopefully, many of you will be on stage 1 year from now when we do Startup Summit 2023. So that's the main closing announcement. I think what we had today is a outstanding keynote speech panel discussion on what it really takes to get through adversity when you're scaling. And the interesting thing I noticed is each one on stage has built a really big company. And when you ask them a question about give an example of adversity, the examples came thick and fast. There were so many. And in every single case, that example led to something better than happening in the company. So that's something personally I take away from today. And hopefully that gives all of you also some strength and courage for what may be a difficult 1 or 2 years for the ecosystem ahead of us. That's pretty much it from me. I have to thank everyone who put this together. This is a grand experiment from us at X to10X to try and bring the ecosystem together for these conversations year after year. So thanks everyone for showing up. I want to thank the team for putting it together. I want to thank again our panelists and our guests for coming and making their time to spend it with us. And I know, Harsha, you've traveled a long distance. I know, Harsh, you came down all the way from Mumbai. So deep appreciation and thanks. Binny, you had to come anyway, so we are eternally thankful. So with that, we'll conclude. Thanks, everyone. You've been great. Please stay for drinks and dinner and look forward to chatting over dinner. See you.